straight from the mayor's mouth, with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
Hello everyone and welcome to Straight from the Mayor's Mouth. Hello there, Matt. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thanks. Feeling very good after I had a bit of a sickness, a bit of a cold.
Yeah, for the last 2 weeks you've been struggling a bit, but look at you. You're bouncing back. You're as fit as a fiddle again, all that sort of stuff, and welcome to the long weekend.
Eh? Yeah, important things on a long weekend. Obviously, Dubbo's very busy when it's a long weekend. Lots of people coming out to Dubbo.
Yes.
Double demerit points, so if you're out there on the road,
that's right. Be
very
safe
careful
on the roads for two reasons. Be safe
right.
and obviously think about the money. So if you do happen to go out there and speed, not the right option to do this time around the year.
Whatever it takes you to slow down, whether it's the money, whether it's the points, whatever it is, or just maybe safety,
right.
Yeah, keep an eye on that. And there are lots of people around. Of course, one of the major events is Rugby Championships, New South Wales Junior Rugby Championships.
Yes, there's lots of people in town for that, isn't there?
There are, and I get to go up on Monday and present one of the trophies there for one of the events, so that's always exciting. I like to watch a bit of the game as well, but also just talk to people. I'm not sure if Kerry Chikarovsky will be there this time, but I've run into her previously there.
Kerry Chikarovsky, that's a blast from the past name.
Yeah, so leader of the opposition, you may remember, in the state parliament. And I remember speaking to her when she was in Parliament, but I've run into her because she's very involved in rugby. I don't know if she's on the board, but I certainly know she's involved in rugby. I've seen her at events here before, and I've been down in Sydney at various rugby events, and I've run into her down there as well. So she's obviously very involved.
Fantastic.
And obviously, for some strange reason, she's very focused on the female rugby game.
She might have a daughter, as it might have played, or maybe it could have been the case at some stage.
Yeah, but anyway, she seems like a very good advocate. And I did go up last year and I had to present, I think it was the under-14 Women's Junior State Cup or Junior winners last year. Right. And they were pretty impressive watching that game. I was pretty impressed with that. Monday again, I'll go up and catch at least maybe half or one game up there and watch the junior talent there. So hopefully that junior talent in the males and the females, or the boys and the girls, gets all the way through to senior rugby so we can improve some of our senior rugby ranks.
That's the poor old Wallabies and the Jillaroos and this sort of ones. I think the Jillaroos are going okay. The poor old Wallabies are struggling again. I don't know. That's one of those sort of sports. But, actually interesting. Saturday morning I was down there doing the park run, 400 park runs too, by the way. So that was fabulous, wasn't it?
To
see that.
To park run. It is fantastic, isn't it? That just seems incredible. Over 8+ years ago when they started that. I'm sure they'll have another birthday celebration later on this year when the official birthday or anniversary date is, but 400 park runs is pretty impressive, isn't it?
Oh, well, look, went down there. There's a good crowd down there on Saturday morning, and while I'm walking along there, because I sort of tend to do a bit more of a power walk these days rather than sort of the run, although my run couldn't really be constituted as a run. It was more like a slow jog, really.
I'm thinking of an image here, Kath and Kim. And then, is it Kel?
Kel Daylight,
Kel,
wasn't it? That's the one. Yep. With his little power walk sort of thing happening.
With little weights, do you take the little weights down?
The little weights and what are they, little bubby pack around him sort of thing. Right. That's the one. Yeah. Pretty much you could picture me. That's probably me on Saturday doing that sort of stuff. But I was down there Saturday morning and there was a group there, a group of girls and their trainers and the coaching staff and the parents, and they were from the Illawarra district, and they all sort of dressed up in all their gear, and they're getting ready for the first big day of tournament. So, and they look like a pretty impressive looking unit, let me tell you. So I'm thinking, okay, I don't really want to come across you if you're in the opposition sort of thing, because they did look like a powerful group. So, your case in point, I'm sure the grand final on Sunday afternoon, is Sunday or Monday? Monday afternoon will be a cracker. So where's that, up at Apex Oval? Or
Apex Oval, yeah, that's right. So I'm not sure where all the games are being played, but they're probably utilising a number of our facilities. And that's one thing that I often find when I talk to various event organisers, whether it be touch footy or cricket or rugby, any of these kind of, where they've got lots of teams coming, the fact that we've got so many sporting ovals in close proximity, sometimes a 5-minute drive, sometimes a 5-minute walk from each other, all those grounds are fantastic. And if you're trying to run an event like that in Sydney, you've got suburbs away that you've got to go for some of those events. And then just going to the next suburb in Sydney, that can be a half-hour trip or worse with traffic. So that's what some of these organisers love about coming to a place like Dubbo. People can get around all those. And if they run out of grounds, very unusual, but if they run out of a number of grounds, and I know one bowls tournament did this where we didn't have enough bowling greens to run an event, then they went as far as Narromine. Now, my initial thought was, gee, that's a fair way to go. But when I spoke to the organisers, they said, it's a 20-minute drive. Never mind, that's nothing. It is. It's exactly what they said. If we were doing this event in Sydney, we'd have people going to get the number of bowling greens we need. We'd have people travelling an hour between games. So 20 minutes, people quite like it, and they don't mind driving out in some country roads is a bit different for them.
That's right. Oh, look, it's fantastic. Now, speaking of sport, and from the point of view of that, happened to sort of duck down there on Thursday down to Barden Park. And I know last week we spoke about this, what's happened there at Barden Park. So talk us through it. It looked fantastic. Those lanes 1 and 2 looked absolutely magic. You wouldn't even know. Seamless, to be honest, in regards to the whole presentation of it. So it's all been resurfaced. Is that right?
That's right. And I'm hoping it's better than just lanes 1 and 2. I haven't actually been down to look at the final job now that it's been done. But when we opened that back in November 2014, Rob Di Castella was there at the opening. I remember that.
Yep.
We actually had a poly relay race. So I think from memory we had Troy Grant with a team and Mark Coulton with a team, myself with counsellors, and so we had a little relay race there. Seemed a bit rigged.
You against Rob Di Castella?
Well, no, Rob didn't run. It was only maybe it was a 4x100 or a 4x400. I think it was a 4x100.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you just organised your own team. So I said I'll get some counsellors. So we had some counsellors in the event.
Yep.
But I think there was some cheating's too strong a word, but there was some stacking involved there. And I think the team that either probably Troy it was rather than Mark Coulton there, had some young, talented athletes running against
So what, Mark and Troy managed to pull a bit of a Hartley just prior to the actual start of the race?
No, to their credit, they
brought
ran
in a
it.
17-year-old or something, state champion?
Well, no, they ran in it, but just the rest of the members of their team. See, I had counsellors, so I said, you just get some federal pollies in or some state pollies, but they seem to not have enough of those and have some other people they had to drag into the event. So it was all good fun. So when we put that track in then, and we're talking about approximately a $6 million build for not just the track but the grandstand, the whole lot. We knew at that point in time from our previous research that if we wanted to keep that at an international standard track, because it is an international standard track, you can qualify with a time that you might need for an event. And if you're running at an event there, if you broke a world record, again, assuming the timing apparatus was all set up in the correct way, but the track itself, they wouldn't be able to say, no, we're not sure that track's really 400 metres. Not sure if that track's actually got the correct surface on it, international standard. But we knew we needed to start putting money aside, depreciation if you like, for a replacement of the track surface in 10 years, which seems like a long time in 2014, but we blinked and here we are 10 years later.
Yeah.
We always knew it would be around the $1 million mark, thereabouts. So as part of the expenses of council, we said, we know we've got to put away about $100,000 each year, and people look at that and go, what are you putting all that money away for? Where's all that money going to? Well, it's going for depreciation or future replacement value. As it turned out, we did very well. We made an application to the last state government knowing this was coming up, and this is back when the coalition was in power, and we made an application, even though we had the money set aside, they're ready to go, we made an application for a grant to resurface that, and we were successful to get $1.06 million from the state government.
How good's that? Like you've actually had the money there, but you got the grants and happy days.
And so we had to use a little bit of our money because the total resurfacing was $1.237 million. So
when you say total resurfacing, so it wasn't just lanes 1 and 2, it was the entire track.
The entire track.
That's why it looks so seamless.
That's right. Good.
That actually makes sense now. I've seen that. I'm actually trying to find how did they do this? This is amazing. This is incredible.
And I remember when we were doing the initial track surfacing, so the whole track, David Payne Constructions had the contract to do that, but the track surfacing was a specialty. And the people came in from overseas. That was their job. They travelled the world, this team. And so I remember going over there, looking at what they were doing, just while they were going through some of the part of the process. They didn't speak a lot of English, but just watching what they were doing, and then there'd be chalk marks on there, and you could see them almost down there at the ground level, laying down there, just trying to pick out any discrepancies there and doing it. So they were artisans. They were really focused on their job. Now, again, I didn't get a chance to go down and watch the resurfacing, but presumably it was similar. Strip it back to the bare surface underneath, and then relay the whole surface, and then do the line marking. So all
stop
the line
and think
markings
about it. It would have to be done like that, wouldn't it? Like if you're a runner, especially sprinting those 100 metres, you don't want to have a sudden little undulation in the middle of your lane.
For you and I, it may not make much of a difference, but for people that they're at the peak of their game and running that 100 metres and getting down towards the 10-second mark, you can't afford to have a little discrepancy. One of the things we found when we were looking at building Barden Park initially, we went on a bit of a tour to other tracks around the state. Not many, 3, maybe 4. We went and looked at because there weren't many of those tracks around the state. And that was one of the bits of advice. I'm sure it was at Campbelltown. We went down to there, looked at their track, and their lanes 1 and 2 were worn through. And the manager of that facility said, whatever you do, when you build it, get it done, pat yourself on the back, and the next day start putting money aside. He said, see these here? this is not international standard anymore. This isn't great. People don't love this, but we don't have the money to replace lanes 1 and 2 or any of the track, and we need to do that. So that's where we said, well, we've got to put that money aside. To retain our international accreditation, we do need to do resurfacing on a regular basis. But what we also do when we have training going on down there, and there are different groups that go down and train, we put up signs and say, please use lane 3 and outwards rather than lanes 1 and 2, because obviously in an event that's not in your lane, everyone's going to run down in lane 1 and 2 because it's a shorter distance if you're doing a normal longer distance.
Posts after about 400, all the 800s, they all sort of move across the 15s and, that sort of stuff all jump into those 1 and 2 lanes, don't they?
And I think trainers are pretty good because it doesn't matter if you're training down there. If you train out in lane 3, then it's a longer distance, so you can take a notice of all of that sort of thing. So that seems to have worked quite well. We protected lanes 1 and 2 and they lasted the 10 years. So we've got that resurfaced now. And just in time too, because the winter season's already started there. We've got 31 school carnivals booked. We've got 3 days of field events booked. And then we've got, once New South Wales, once the Little Athletics starts again, we've got things like New South Wales Little Athletics State Multi-Event, Athletics New South Wales Country Championships, those sort of events that we've had in the past. Again, we're always looking out for those events. But what's great about it is that you've got kids going there from their school, running in their local athletics carnival, running on an international standard track. So kids in Sydney might be able to go out and run on Homebush or Campbelltown, kids out here, and then we do get kids from around the region as well. Obviously, there's not 31 schools in Dubbo, so there's schools that do come from around the region. And then when you get to Little Athletics, then you've got the process where you've got regionals and you've got zone and you've got steps to get through to get to state championships. And again, it was always a huge disadvantage for any of those kids, those sprinters, any of those long distance runners running on a grass track, and they get down to Homebush, and it was different. There was no doubt about it that the kids are at a disadvantage now. They don't have that same disadvantage.
Well, you see the, as they say, the proof's in the pudding of the fact that we're getting kids like Ella Penman, for argument's sake, the St John's College student, who's, she's an Australian runner now, and all from training here at the Dubbo track.
No, it's pretty exciting, and just having that ability, it's a bit like our theatre, being able to go out onto a world-class stage, being able to go out to a world-class track, not feel like you're a second-class citizen because you're in a regional area. What is nice, we used to have it at the stage in the early days where we had it locked and you could apply or you could put an application in for a key, you'd pay a little bit of money for that key and pay an annual fee to be able to access that. And we got to the stage not many people were taking it up. We said, we're not really wearing this track out. We should open it up. So it is now open, so you can go there during the winter months any time between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. You can just go down there, use the track. You can go down there any time between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. during daylight savings time to use the track. Now, when I say any time, keep in mind if you went down there at 10 a.m. on a day there's a school carnival on, they've got preference, obviously. You can't say, okay, I just want to do a few laps here. Can you just hold the carnival? You've got Little Athletics. They typically run on a Friday night, for example. So an event or a booking will have preference. But we do have groups who go down there, either small groups, there's track sesh goes down there and use it on Wednesday night, for example. You've got people that go down there early in the morning and run, and it's a great surface to run on. In fact, I haven't done it for a little while, but I used to do a bit of training down there, and I'd look at my training times and go, oh, wow, that was fantastic. And then I go and do parkrun on Saturday morning. I could never run as fast because I'm not running on a perfect flat
exactly
surface.
Right. Yeah, get that nice little rebound surface.
Well, and it's flat, so you haven't got hills to worry about. You haven't got corners. You've got obviously big bends, but not sharp corners. So it's a good, if you want to do a really good time, it's a really good place to train at.
It's a good feel-good moment when you sort of see your time suddenly sort of come down like that.
So
isn't that wonderful to see?
It's all done there, ready to go.
Yeah, good on them. Well done. Well, it does look fantastic too, by the way. Now, we discussed this going back a while ago in regards to cashless transactions at our waste facilities and our transfer stations. It looks as though it's all about to happen. It did create a little bit of controversy, I noticed, through social media during the week. Why have we moved to this, Matt? What's the reason why we're suddenly going to a cashless transaction?
And I do hope people had enough notice, because you're right. I think it was probably back around March we started talking about this process, and we did actually put it out there for your say, so people give us feedback. And I don't know if we got any feedback at all, or if we did, it was very limited feedback on it. The logic back then was that in the 12 months from December 2022 to December 2023, we'd had about $470,000 worth of damage done to our facility, to the waste transfer, the Willandra Waste Depot.
That's a lot, isn't it?
It is a lot.
Yeah.
And people were breaking in looking for money. And, of course, we had money there. We had cash there. So that's not great. Then you've also got the problem where in Wellington, you've got the transfer station down in Wellington. You take cash there, for example, and the bank that we would typically use has no longer got a branch in Wellington. So we could change banks, which is a big process for any organisation to do, or then it's a matter of running that money through to Dubbo. And anyone that's got a retail business out there knows that there is time for staff to go through, look at the float in the morning, count that, make sure it's right, do your cash transactions through the day, get to the end of the day, do your float, do that, make sure that's right. All that staff time is largely negated when you've got cashless transactions.
Did you find the fact that in regards to that, was there a lot of people still using cash during that time period?
Well, that was the final trigger.
Yeah.
When we analysed that, we found that about 1%
That's it.
of all transactions were cash.
Only 1%.
Yeah. So once it got down to that level, we said, and probably for those people, they probably had the ability to use cashless, but they probably had some cash sitting in their car or maybe some cash in their wallet, so they use that. So from the 1st of July, the Wellington Waste and Recycling Facility on the way to Narromine Road will be cashless. Wellington Waste Transfer Station and Stewarttown, Geary, Ballymore, Umundry and Toongai, all those transfer stations as well. So basically everything to do with those waste facilities across Dubbo will all be cashless. So
I suppose the only other question I'd ask is it I did notice that one of the comments sort of put up there, this one's posted, that it's illegal for an organisation to not accept cash. Is that the case in regards to this?
It's legal for an organisation to say how it will receive money. So I think where people get confused, cash is still legal tender. Yeah. But an organisation can choose how it will receive money. You go down the streets to cafes, lots of it happened through COVID, and you can have a sign up that says no cash accepted. That's a decision by that business owner. That cafe can also say, I don't like the look of you, Mark Barnes. You can't come into my cafe. Hold on, why are you doing that? Well, it's my business. It's my premises. I can choose who comes in. Now, obviously, most businesses will say everyone come in because they want as many customers as possible. Yeah. And many businesses do choose to still take cash and credit cards, etc. But again, during COVID, a lot said it makes sense to go cashless. Then they found, well, it didn't make any difference, so let's just keep going that way. In our case, there's probably a few steps there. There's some staff efficiency, certainly break-ins. We think that will be reduced by this process. And again, that whole process having to bring money from, let's say, Wellington through to Dubbo to Banker, that's all a bit clumsy. Now, keep in mind, there are some recyclable items that are segregated on delivery and free of charge. That's both at Wellington and Wellington Waste Facility. So, for example, if you've got car batteries, old TVs, domestic e-waste, that sort of thing. So that doesn't change. So none of the processes change. The charges don't change apart from, obviously, 1st of July charges will go up as part of our budget process. But you're not being charged merchant fee, so that was a very deliberate decision. So you're not being penalised for using non-cash transactions. And I think for most people, well, obviously 99% of people in this scenario,
that's right.
Most people have been
you can
using
literally
that.
say it is most people, more than that.
Yeah, that's right. So, look, again, I know there was a bit of commentary on social media. If you really don't like the idea of having any cards, any FBOS, if you really like the old passbook days, you can go and buy or get a My Dubbo region card that you can load up at the Dubbo or the Wellington Visitor Information Centre. So you can use that as almost a temporary card. So you can get the My Dubbo card and you can put $50 on it. Yeah, right. And then you can go and use that. So we'll accept that as well as normal FBOS credit cards.
Okay, right. Yeah.
It's something we've often used in shopping or shopping promotions, if you like. Get a My Dubbo gift card, and a lot of businesses around Dubbo accept the My Dubbo card, part of the promotion kind of thing. So,
is there a voucher that Dubbo people are entitled to in regards to the waste management out there to drop off your waste?
Yeah, you're on the ball, aren't you? So you do get an annual tipping voucher. So basically you get one free visit to a council waste facility per year. So when
do I have to access that online, or how do I get that voucher?
You turn up and you say, I'd like to claim my voucher, present your licence so that you can show that, yes, I'm Mark Barnes, I live at this address, and that's fine. You turn up again next week and say, hey, I want to get my one free voucher, show your licence. I go, sorry, Mark.
That green is now red. You've already used it.
That's right. Last week you used that. So per financial year, you get one free visit to the tip.
Right. So if you've got a plan, if you've got a bit of rubbish there to get it out this financial year, so only got a few days left or a few weeks left until the end of this financial year. If you want to go out the following week, post this financial year, you can go in again and get another free voucher.
Good point, actually. Yeah, and keep in mind it's one per facility in the LGA. So you
Yeah,
can't go
right,
to Wellington and then say, oh, good, I'll go to Dubbo the week after. But you're right. We've only got a few weeks after this financial year. So quick, get in
Start
now.
to get the clean-up done now.
That's right. And then 1st July, go out there again.
Absolutely. I noticed here, Matt, that you attended a local roads congress in Parliament House this week, and I saw that you had some information on a trial that's being conducted using AI to help repair potholes. What, so you get little computers going around with their little shovels and that, do they? How does that work? So this is not like sort of, Arnold Schwarzenegger. We're not getting little robotic AI sort of Terminator sort of things digging up and putting in potholes sort of thing.
Well, not that I've seen yet, but who knows?
Thank goodness.
But I did see a very funny sign when I was in Sydney on Monday. There was a huge banner hanging, or maybe I saw it online somewhere, but it came to me on Monday anyway. Someone showed me on Monday. And basically it was a construction site, a large building. It was a high-rise building going up. And the sign said on there, hey, ChatGPT, finish this job.
That's right.
And obviously advertising for a union or some construction jobs. But
love it.
Look, AI can do some things. It can't do everything. We haven't got Arnie Schwarzeneggers walking around at this stage.
I hope not. That's my big fear.
Not that we know of anyway. So
that's right.
Essentially in this scenario, there's a trial that's being conducted in Sydney Council and we've actually had some brief discussions about it, but we haven't done anything with it yet. But one of the things, obviously, is if we can detect problems with the road, potholes, cracks, whatever, early, prevention is better than cure. Get in and fill those potholes earlier, fill those cracks up earlier, then they don't become larger potholes because you'll have often seen it. You'll see a small pothole on a road and it seems like days later it's suddenly a big pothole because once it's broken through that seal on top, then it's easy for that to be chewed away, bit of water around, bit of rain
like
around.
a dentist. When you go to the dentist, get your x-ray done and they can suddenly pick up the little fine cracks early before it becomes a major issue.
Yeah, exactly right. So what they did with this trial down in Sydney Council was they put some cameras on things like garbage trucks.
Right.
Because garbage trucks pretty much go over all of your urban roads every week. So you've got garbage trucks there. As they're going around, they are constantly videoing the roads.
Wow.
Some cases it might be photos, some cases it might be videos. But essentially, they're seeing the roads and then you could have all the information and someone trying to analyse that, but that's fairly laborious. Then AI detects it and then gives the various potholes, the various cracks, a rating, a grading, if you like.
Right.
Once it gets to a certain level, that alerts someone, hey, you've got a pothole here, maybe go and get that fixed now, and away you go.
Wow.
Now, one of the things the presenter talked about was it sounds great, but some people are worried that they'll show a poorer condition of the roads. Therefore, we need to find more money to try and fix up those roads and get them to a better condition. But the general discussion in the room was, well, we're probably better off knowing about them. Even if we haven't got the money to fix them, we can prioritise.
I was going to say, you can plan and prioritise them.
Correct, so you can plan and prioritise. And I understand some people, it suddenly what they thought was a $5 billion backlog of road work that needs to be done is a $10 billion backlog of road work that needs to be done. I understand the fear there. But again, I still think if we can do this better, then we can be a bit smarter and maybe over time reduce that through more efficiency. So that was certainly interesting. Yeah. And I did talk, one of our directors was down at the same conference or congress it was called technically.
Right.
And I did talk to him about that. We don't own our garbage trucks. Our garbage trucks are a contract. So we have contractors who do our collection. But I don't think it'd be that big a problem if we said we want to put some equipment on your trucks because they're driving around all these roads. But even talking to our director, he said it would still be more efficient even if we just had someone employed to drive over the roads, not on a garbage truck, for example, someone employed to drive over those roads and actually do this rather than a more manual process that we do at the moment. So it's changing. I keep going to roads congresses and talking about them, and I use the example of Cars, the cartoon, where you've got this wonderful road building machine that gets towed behind something else and or gets towed behind Lightning McQueen at one stage, but basically, and just does the road in one go. I said, so is someone going to invent one of those?
Yeah,
where
absolutely. That would be nice, wouldn't it,
a terrible bit of road, and it goes along out the other end.
And it's Formula One smooth. There it is.
Right, that's what we want. And they all laugh at me. So I'm not sure we're there at that level yet, but we might be able to get it at the other end. So if we can detect what the problems look like earlier and how we might fix those, then we might be able to say, well, sure, we haven't got this wonderful machine that gets towed along and fixes the road, but we have got the ability to pick up these problems earlier and then see what we can do to address those.
It's a very exciting prospect, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And again, that's where the value you get out of things like a congress or conferences or these sort of meetings. You let other people look at some of these things and see what you can learn from those. The trial's only been going in one suburb or one council area in Sydney, but how can we all learn from that? That was the idea of that presentation.
Oh, fabulous. Now, while you're at this road congress, there was also some discussion about the impact that heavy EVs might have on local roads, and the reduction in road funding with users using electricity instead of petrol and diesel fuels, with, of course, the fuel excise taxes. So is this a real concern? Is this something that they are concerned about? Because obviously there is the excise that you gain from the petrol cars coming through. What about the EVs? Is this going to be an issue that they're foreseeing?
Well, it's good to think about these things. And one of the great things about this particular presentation, there was one person from another council who talked about how they're changing their fleet over, like Dubbo is. And actually, I think when I listen to this presentation, I think we're probably a bit more advanced in changing over our fleet to EVs. You've probably seen it already. We've got our staff already driving around in Teslas, in MGs, in electric vehicles. And we've talked about the fact that even though the purchase price is dearer, the cost per kilometre is cheaper. So I'm quite happy to put my hand on my heart and say to the community, staff driving Teslas is saving you money, which some people think, oh, that can't be right. But when you realise how cheap they run,
the time frame, absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. So, and that was along the same lines this particular presentation was. But then some old chestnuts came up, but there's some things to think about here as well. So one of the questions in terms of the answers or questions and answers from the audience to the presenter, one of the questions was EVs are typically heavier, so is that going to do more damage to our roads? Is this something we need to be changing how we build roads, for example, or looking at our maintenance regime? One of the interesting things is that for the same type of car, so for a sedan, a normal family top sedan car, which might be a common light vehicle in a council fleet, you might have a normal vehicle 1.5 tonnes, you might have an EV 1.8 tonnes. So they are a little bit heavier typically for the same car versus car because you've got batteries in there. So that's something, do we need to take notice of that? But as the presenter said, well, you might think about that, but then there's a lot of people there that drive large SUVs. They drive four-wheel drives. I don't want to say any brand names here, but there's some popular four-wheel drives that they drive. Utes, SUVs, pickups, if you want to call them, if you want to use an American term. And typically those are 2.2 tonnes, 2.5 tonnes. So we don't seem to have been worried about driving heavier cars in the past. Because some people are against EVs, that's a convenient argument. So I think the presenter dismissed that a little bit, saying...
So as a standard SUV, would it be heavier than a Tesla?
Absolutely. If you compared I'm trying not to say brand names here.
I know just
but if you compared some of the popular... SUVs, certainly larger SUVs or even some of the utes that we see, some of those larger four-wheel drive utes that are very popular out there, then if you compare those to some of the Tesla, the sedans, for example, and again, a Tesla Model 3 off the top of my head is probably about 1.8 tonnes. It's not unusual for some of these larger SUVs and utes to be 2.2. You get some of the very popular larger ones, 2.5 tonnes for some of those. So I think the presenter basically said, look, there are points to be made there that they are a bit heavier. They're not so much heavier that it's going to make a huge impact on the roads. But keep in mind, we've been driving cars that are a lot heavier anyway. So that was a bit dismissed. The fuel excise was really interesting. So let me throw some facts at you around the fuel excise. The fuel excise tax was introduced way back in 1929.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so
I didn't realise that.
There wouldn't have been many cars on the road. And obviously building the road network would have been a really important part. You can imagine back then, these cars will never take off because there's no roads for them to drive on. Well, let's start building those roads. A bit like people say now with EVs. EVs won't take off because there's no charging stations.
There's no charging stations around the place, absolutely.
So 1929, the federal government said, we're going to put a fuel excise tax. If you're rich enough to afford a car, you can put petrol or diesel, I suppose. I'm not sure when diesel was introduced, but petrol or diesel in it. Then you're going to pay a bit of a tax. And every cent of that tax goes towards building new roads. Great idea. At some stage later, don't know when, at some stage later, farmers said, hold on a second, we're driving around a diesel tractor on our farm and you're charging me a fuel excise tax? I'm not using the roads. So why am I paying for these roads to be fixed up? You should give me that money back. And so we then, again, I don't know when, but at some stage then, you had the fuel tax credits scheme introduced. So farmers can say, here's all the fuel excise tax I paid and all the diesel I purchased this year, and then they get all the taxes back. Miners then said, not miners' children, but miners that dig stuff out of the ground, said, well, our vehicles are driving around on our roads and they're whatever standard of roads they might be, but why are we paying a fuel excise tax? And so the government said, no problems at all.
Well, it seemed like a simple idea, suddenly became a lot more complicated.
It did become a lot more complicated. Then, to throw a spanner in the works, so those farmers got their fuel
Right.
tax credit scheme as well. So basically, miners and farmers
Got the
were getting money
exemptions.
back.
Yep.
Okay. Now, in 1957, the federal government said, you know what? We're getting too much money from the fuel excise tax to put towards the roads.
Getting too much money.
Too much money.
Jeez, I'd like to hear a government say that today.
Well, they didn't say it out loud. Internally, they said that.
Right.
And they said we've got one of two choices. We could, A, reduce the fuel excise tax. I like that idea. Or B, just put the money into general revenue. Which option do you think they chose?
I'm thinking the general revenue would be probably the way they probably went.
That's right. So in 1957, the fuel excise tax was disconnected from the roads.
Right.
And so then all that money just goes back into general revenue. Now,
So the fuel excise tax, which obviously still exists, but now it simply just goes straight into general revenue, and from that, people then fight for their dollars then to fix their roads up.
well, they fight for the dollars to do everything they're minded to do.
Yeah.
And some money from general revenue goes towards roads. There's no doubt about that. I'll give you some data around that in a moment.
Yeah.
But obviously, you could still get the money for roads out of other areas, or you could say that fuel excise tax goes to general revenue and then you get money out of GST or whatever. You could pick something else there. So it's really just shifting the deck chairs as such. But to give you an idea of the dollars we're talking about here, in the 2022-2023 financial year, the federal government generated $21.9 billion in fuel excise revenue.
Is that right?
So it's a lot of petrol we buy.
That is a lot of petrol.
And this is the point that was made at the Congress.
Yeah.
If everyone goes to an EV tomorrow, we're not getting $21.9 billion.
Yeah.
Now, here's the scary part. When we talk about, some people put the argument forward to say the only way these renewables will work is because the federal government's subsidising renewables. And I won't go into that part of the argument, but the biggest recipient of any subsidy from the federal government at the moment is in diesel or in fuels.
Is that right?
Because of the $21.9 billion the federal government generates, $8 billion is given back to farmers and miners with the fuel tax credit scheme.
Yeah, right, okay. Yep.
Now, when you look at the modern farm, I'm not making any accusations directly at farmers here, but the modern farm typically will have some diesel vehicles on their farm, and those diesel vehicles do drive on the roads. They do drive into town, they go on holidays, they drop kids into school, whatever it might be. It's pretty hard to argue that all of that money is spent just on that farm. But again, it doesn't matter anymore because it's not dedicated towards going towards the roads. It's just general revenue. So the reality is, if you're being fair and if you wanted to see EVs be adopted a bit quicker in this country, you'd say, let's get rid of the fuel tax credit scheme. There's $8 billion extra on our bottom line for a start. And then there's a lot of people out there who would say,
So you're going to have a fight with the farmers on that one.
well, you would have a fight with the farmers on that one, but that would be fair. Why is that group getting it? Because again, it goes into general revenue. But what you would have is you'd have people saying, well, now that I'm paying for all this extra tax on the fuel, well, why don't we use an EV? Why don't we do that? The other thing you could do is you could reduce the fuel excise tax for everyone, because at the moment they're only getting the $21.9 billion minus $8 billion. So
really 14 billion probably roundabout.
yeah, that's right. So $13.9 billion is what the government's getting net. So you could say to everyone, well, we're going to reduce the fuel excise tax by 33%, but it's going to be paid by everyone with no credits out there. Well, I'm getting to federal policy now, so I'll leave that alone.
Yep.
But then the other information I thought was relevant was, okay, of all the revenue the federal government's got, how much was used in transport projects? So not just roads, but bridges, transport projects in general.
Yep.
So of that $13.9 billion, approximately $6.8 billion went to general revenue, $7.1 billion went to land transport projects.
So that's basically that's the roads.
Yeah, so basically a third, in very round numbers, $21.9 billion, that's what they generate, $7.1 billion goes to the roads now. So fascinating when you start to break it down like that. So then the initial question was, are we going to be in trouble with the roads when we don't have the fuel excise tax to pay for the roads? Well, what would probably be fairer, looking at all that scenario there, is just a per kilometre rate on every car. So get rid of the fuel excise tax, every car on the road, whether it be an EV, whether it be a petrol or a diesel car, you just pay, when you do your registration each year, what's your odometer say, Mark? Oh, my odometer says 68,257, okay. Last year it said this, you pay 2 cents per kilometre and away you go. And that was kind of the result of that discussion there, to say, well, maybe that's the best way to go. Again, there'd probably have to be some sort of transition process, but everyone just pays a per kilometre rate, and you'd pay it on different weights. So if you drive,
is this potentially the way they're looking at wanting to go with things? Is this sort of something now that the governments think about?
Some state governments have already looked at that idea of the per kilometre rate.
Yeah.
And you, in my mind, you should only do that when you remove the fuel excise. So in other words, having two tax schemes doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
The other one, sorry, just to finish off on that part, would be that you'd have weight qualifications. You wouldn't be per kilogram, for example, but it might be if your vehicle's below 2 tonnes, you pay this many cents per kilometre, 2 to 5 tonnes, this many cents. Obviously, when you get to prime movers, you're paying, they're doing more damage, and damage is not the right word. They're using up the road at a higher rate, so they should be paying a higher rate, which seems to make sense. And again, with fuel, they're towing a heavier load, so they're using more fuel.
Do you happen to know what the fuel excise is right now?
No idea. Oh, in terms of you're talking about cents per litre? Yeah, no idea.
Okay.
But I remember when they talked about the GST, and they're going back to 1999 now, so going back a long time. Yeah. And Tony Lawler was our federal member.
Right.
And I'm sure,
it's going back a while ago, yeah.
I'm sure they did a little promotion when they were talking about, no, it would have been before 1999. Anyway, sometime around there, they did a promotion talking about the GST. If we introduce the GST, it'll get rid of all other taxes and you'll just have 10%, because at the time there was sales tax, and I think it was 11% or 21% or 31% or zero, depending on the actual item that you're buying. And I remember back then in my IT business, we used to have products that we would sell, and the official sales tax that would be charged on that, we weren't collecting. It was all done behind the scenes, not by the retailer like GST is, but it was 14.82%. And I'd go, how do you get that? You can only be 11, 21 or 31. But what would happen is these various companies would go to the tax office and get a private ruling, and they'd say, well, there's a certain amount of software in this product. Software's got 0% sales tax, and a certain amount of hardware, that's got a different rate of sales tax. And then pro rata basis, let's come up with this number. They'd get an agreement from the tax office. So that product, it might be, for example, you're buying a modem, and so the charger itself might have been charged at full sales tax. The hardware in the modem might have been charged a certain rate, but the software, which obviously was some, was a lesser sales tax.
Why does it remind me of those Mike Willesee interviews when a certain prospective PM tried to explain the rulings there in regards to making a cake?
A cake, or the chook. The thing, my favourite was the chook. A hot chook or a cold chook. Depends what it was. So that, it was complicated, but I remember when they did this promotion, and I'm sure it was Tony Lawler, standing there at a petrol station with one of our federal pollies, and basically standing there pumping petrol saying, well, if the GST comes in, then you would only pay this many cents per litre at the time, and it was a reduction in the price because they were going to get rid of all the fuel excise taxes. Now, it worked in lots of areas where you got rid of sales tax, but for some reason, we've got GST on fuel. We've still got the fuel excise tax, and I think there's a funny anomaly there where I think we're paying tax on a tax, because I think the fuel excise tax gets charged before the GST's added on at the end. So I'm sure there's some funny little thing there, whether it's changed now, but I'm sure there was something there where you paid your 10% on top of the fuel excise tax, so you're being double taxed. Again, you do pay GST on your electricity bill, so if you're paying for your electricity on an EV, then you're paying some tax there if you like. But I think that was the general outcome from the discussion on Monday was, if we had a per kilometre rate for all cars, weight-based and no fuel excise tax, that would be a fairer way to go, which would encompass EVs. And I think most EV owners are going, well, we're okay with that. If it's fair for everyone, then that seems quite a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah, well, certainly, as they say, watch this space. Dubbo Regional Livestock Markets. We never did a chat about this, Matt, because it's been brought up on a number of occasions. It's been getting a lot of social commentary in regards to the potential in regards to what has been maybe the suggestion that the council might be interested in wanting to sell the Saleyards. There's certainly been no resolution made on this, and I don't think it's even gone to a vote, or even they're probably still a point of getting public opinion at this point in time. The same thing sort of looking at. Now, I noticed that your last mayoral memo corrected a few pieces of misinformation that's out there in regards to the fact the expression of interest process is now closed. So if you wanted to sort of have a bit of a say on this, I know that there was quite a few people there the other day at the last council meeting voicing their objection to any sense of potential sale on the Saleyards. So let's talk it through. Let's sort of start this discussion. We'll start off with a very easy one. Why has council even brought this up as a point of discussion?
So it does have a bit of history about it. And if I go back to Dubbo City Council days, there was certainly discussion about the operating model that we've got there at the moment. And it's a complicated model. And it's one of those things that when you've had an organisation of business that's been there for 74 years, so we are going back a long time ago. We go back all the way to the 28th of June 1950 when the Troy Saleyards were commissioned.
Is that right?
So that's going back. And
Yeah.
that was Tarrabagar Shire Council that had possession of those Saleyards. So there's a lot of history there. And as with many things, it evolves and things change. And did you have all those legal documents in place and what's the operating model? As we got to the point now in 2024, surprise, surprise, some things have changed. We've got different legislation now. There's different requirements. So animal welfare is a significant part of the running of the Saleyards now compared to 1950. WH&S is certainly significant in our staff that are out there running that now. So the model we've got there now, when we've looked at that and we've had discussions with OLG, we've had discussions with our legal advisors, and the model we've got there now probably isn't fit for purpose in 2024. Again, 1950, fine. 1960, probably fine as well. But as time went on, we've now got different regulatory requirements and different responsibilities, and even some of the who is responsible, because we own the Saleyards, council, the residents of Dubbo own the Saleyards. We maintain the Saleyards, but we don't run the sales. We don't do the weighing of cattle, for example. So if something happened, if something goes wrong, even knowing who's responsible, that's a big part of the whole issue there. Things like sometimes you'll have stock turn up and they'll be assessed to be not fit for sale. Now, they may need to be put out to be fed up because they might have gotten a bit lean on their trip, or they may have been a bit lean when the farmer put them on the truck, for example. Do we dispose of those? Well, a farmer doesn't love that idea because that loses money for them. Or do we allow them to stay there? We've got some paddocks that they could stay there. Or do we allow them to be transported back to the farm? Someone's got to make a decision on that. Is that council because it's our Saleyards, or is it the DWSA because they're running the sale? So there's all these grey areas, and I don't like grey areas. Council doesn't like grey areas because we need to make sure everyone knows where we stand. So we said we've got to look at the business model. We've got to look at the operating model. The agents are aware of this. They've known about this for some time now. But in looking at that, absolutely our job as councillors, as a group of councillors, is to do the best possible thing we can for 56,720 people, otherwise known as the residents of Dubbo Regional Council. So looking at a sale, is there any requirement for council to own Saleyards? Well, 128 councils across the nation, across the state, not many of those own Saleyards, so there's no requirement to own Saleyards. Is there a requirement that we have to run them? If we own them, for example, do we need to be the ones running the sale? No, not really. So let's look at the options. Could we sell them? Sure, we could. How much are we going to get for them? Don't know. Let's go to market and find that out. Could we lease them out? Sure thing. We lease the caravan park. We used to spend a lot of time, staff time, on our caravan park. We've leased it out. And I said to a councillor the other day, I said, when's the last time we had a discussion about the caravan park? I said, oh, we don't have any discussions about that. Exactly. It's leased out. We get a return on that investment. We still own it, but we know we've got a guaranteed return every year and it's running. We don't have to worry about that. And we're not specialists in running a caravan park. The company that leases it off us is a specialist in that. So we've got that option, or we could continue to run it ourselves, but we would have to change the model. And the other little minor problem with all of this is that on an annual basis, it's not profitable. Now, I say that, and some people look at the figures and go, hold on, it is profitable. Look, you're getting a bottom line profit. If you looked at cash flow basis on a year, on most years, not every year, then you are cash flow positive. But the assets there, they're the big killer for us. It's expensive in terms of the assets. And so when we take into account depreciation, in other words, if depreciation is done right, you depreciate an asset, like we talked before about Barden Park, we were depreciating that track at about $100,000 a year. If you did that correctly, in 10 years' time, you've got $1 million. You can now replace the track. So if you do that correctly with your Saleyards, when you need to replace the various components, then you've got the money. Now, to give you just one little quick bit of information there, in our account that we've got, our internally restricted asset for the Saleyards, we've got about $3.37 million. We estimate that over the next 20 years, we will need to spend about $46.1 million on the Saleyards in replacing the assets.
Right.
There's no way at our current operating model that we will get to the stage where we'll have $46.1 million put aside.
So just in regards to that, based on what you're sort of saying, is it a saleable asset? Like, that to me, it would be a reasonable question. If I'm a business person coming forward with this, and what you're saying to me, it runs at a loss, there's an incurred cost that's going to be coming up at $46 million in the foreseeable future. If I'm a private operator wanting to come in, why would I want to buy it?
That's a very good question. And if I was out there as a salesperson trying to sell it, I'd be saying, look at this, look at the cash flow, isn't this fantastic? Try and buy this. And you've given all the information out there. I think the problem is that council, as an entity, we're not great at running businesses. And that's no reflection on councillors or council staff, but it's a reflection on the overall model. So to give you an idea, any decision we make with any of our businesses, Saleyards being one of those, needs to go to council for a full resolution. Now, we've had in the past where we've wanted to change something. I remember many years ago, back very early in my council career, we wanted to change the opening times of the Saleyards. If they were my personal Saleyards and I had good logical reasons for changing the starting time, I'd talk to the stakeholders and say, I need to change the start time. This is what I've got to do. As of the 1st of this month coming up, we'll change the start time. And you take some feedback on, unless there were some compelling reasons not to, you'd say, okay, we'll move forward with that. When it's council, it's a bit different. It's got to go to a council resolution. We go and advertise that to the public. We make it transparent, open. And I remember that meeting. I was sitting there as a very junior councillor looking around going, holy truth, we've got all these people in the gallery here and they're all having their say at public forum and harumphing and hurrahing and because we want to change the start time. So it's difficult for us to make any changes when you've got to go to a council resolution for all those changes. You've got a group of councillors around, you've got different opinions coming forward. Decisions by committee aren't always great decisions. Sometimes a business person will make decisions. So that's one minor problem we have. The second minor problem we have is that council is risk averse. Running a business involves risk. So you make decisions as a council that you're taking a very conservative approach. Now, there are times in business, I know in my own personal business, you'll take risks sometimes. You go, I think we can do this, and if this and this works out, that'll be great for our bottom line. But if it doesn't work out, it's my money. So I'm losing my money. When it's council, I'm using your money. So then I think, oh, gee, I better be careful we don't lose money. So you tend to make less money, but you're very conservative. So you're less likely to lose money, but you're not going to make great money as well. You're not going to take risks. You're not going to go and try entrepreneurial things because it's council. We have other problems like the award wage. Any of our staff employed in any of our businesses have to be employed under the local government award. The local government award is not friendly for weekend work, for overtime work. As a retail outlet, for example, you've got the retail award, and that knows that you're open 7 days a week. But when you've got to work outside normal operating hours, that becomes clumsy. So, for example, our staff at the Old Dubbo Jail get paid better than if they were normal tourism staff because they're under the local government award. So you've got staff that are working there at the Saleyards that are working under the local government award, and again, very risk averse, making sure we've got more than enough staff there to run it. And so you've got all these complications that are overlaid. Now, if I'm a private operator, what I would look at is how many sheep do you get through each year? How many cattle do you get through each year? Based on those numbers, I reckon I can work out how much money I can make out of it. So in terms of that, and certainly the EIO process is closed, and we certainly received EIOs both for sale and for lease. So there are operators out there that believe they can make money out of it based on that throughput with the efficiencies they would have. And again, these are specialist operators. We're council. We're relying on a staff member understanding how to run a Saleyards, not so much a specialist in the overall operation.
Is this potentially then the objection? Based upon the fact that there are a number of people in our community who seem to be, as you say, like very, very keen on the fact for council to maintain the running of the Saleyards. Are they worried the fact that if it goes to a private organisation that efficiency will have to come in, so therefore it may well be loss of jobs, it may well be costs will rise to, as I say, if it's running at a loss, I'd imagine as a private business operator, you will have to make some changes to start making this operation profitable.
I think there's a whole range of reasons that people might be concerned about it. There are some people who just say no privatisation, but some privatisation is good. And one of the examples that I used in an article I wrote a couple of weeks ago was in relation to the abattoirs. you look in the old days, back in 1958, the state government had a policy of decentralisation, and one of the things they said was councils should own abattoirs. Now, I don't know the exact mechanics of how they started them, whether they gave money or whether they just recommended it, but we had council-owned abattoirs in places like Dubbo, Wagga Wagga, Moree, Mudgee, Forbes, and you look at it now, you go, oh, hold on, I can't remember many of those places having abattoirs now. You're right. You go forward and probably from the 1980s through to maybe the early 2000s, all of those were pretty much shut down. I don't think many of them were sold. Some of them were sold a bit of a fire sale, but ours was gone in the early 80s. And then we had this little upstart come along who said, I might start an abattoirs because I reckon the market's ripe for it and I reckon there's ways you could do it.
You're calling Roger Fetzer an upstart.
Well, he was young, he was having a crack.
That's right, yeah.
But you look now, we've got our number one single employer in Dubbo is Fletcher International Exports. They've got an export business that exports to over 90 countries around the world.
Wow.
I would say to you, absolutely with my hand on my heart, if Dubbo Council would have been Dubbo City Council back in those days and now Dubbo Regional Council, if they own the abattoirs still to this day, there is no way it would be an employer of the size of Fletcher's. There's no way it would be exporting to 90 countries around the world. There's risk associated with that. Some of the things Roger's got to do to export to these countries is quite incredible. There's risk associated with that. Roger has to go overseas sometimes and make sure these deals are right. You can imagine saying, right, I've just got to duck overseas to make sure.
Justifying that, that's right. Exactly, to the person who says, oh, there you go, another rort from the councillors.
Yeah, so there's no way you would get that. And I think that's a great example in my mind of where you've got something that's much better for our economy, having a private owner, much better for employment, obviously, and what a wonderful business. Now, there are other government businesses being privatised. You look at the Qantas's, you look at the Commonwealth Banks of Australia, so they're very large organisations. But again, I think they'd probably run better.
But one of the counter arguments, what you're saying there, though, is that people are saying, look, it's not for council to sell. It was gifted to council, therefore it's not for council to sell. What do you say there?
It's interesting, isn't it? Gifted. If I give you a pen, then it's your pen. And there used to be a politically incorrect term that I won't use now, but back when we were kids, if I gave you something and then I said, I gave you that last week, Mark, I want it back now, there was a term you would have called me something.
That's
again.
right.
I won't
know exactly what you're talking about. Yes.
But if I give it to you, it's yours. Now, gifting is a strange concept. As I said before, it was back on the 20th of June 1950 that the Troy Saleyards were commissioned. They were owned by Talbragar Shire Council. There was an amalgamation in 1980. Dubbo City Council was formed, and part of that amalgamation was Talbragar Shire Council. So all of the assets and liabilities then became the property of Dubbo City Council. In 2016, there was another amalgamation. You had Wellington Shire Council and Dubbo City Council amalgamated to form Dubbo Regional Council. All the assets and the liabilities of Dubbo Regional Council are the assets and liabilities that were those two former council areas. So the owner of the Saleyards is Dubbo Regional Council. Really, that means the owner of Dubbo Regional Livestock Markets. The owner of DRLM is the 56,720 residents of Dubbo Regional Council. Now, the way democracy works is you elect a body, in this case 10 councillors, to manage the assets and liabilities of the council. And that's what happens. And so absolutely the 10 councillors have every right to sell that asset, to close it down, to run it the best possible way. Now, keep in mind, there is a little part of the Local Government Act which I think is absolutely relevant here. Section 232 of the Local Government Act has a range of duties of a councillor. One of those points is that a councillor is to represent the collective interests of residents, ratepayers and the local community. So councillors are given the responsibility, charged with the responsibility, if you like, to make sure they do that. So if someone comes along and says, oh, look, it'd be better for me personally if we kept the Saleyards, well, sorry, as a council, we've got to look at the collective interests of residents, ratepayers and the local community. That's a big group of people, not just one small group. So absolutely, council has every authority to sell, to lease, to run those Saleyards on behalf of all of the residents of Dubbo.
But is it still then in our best interest to keep the Saleyards?
Well, that's the crucial question. So going out And again, what I was saying before, some people don't like the idea because they're anti-privatisation. Some people don't like the idea because it might affect them individually. Some people just like the idea of council owning assets. But ultimately, you've got at the moment, you can go and look through our quarterly budget review statement. So this is a public document. Every quarter, we put our update for where our finances up to the year. If you look at that, the projection for this financial year, for the 2023-2024 financial year, is that we're projecting a net operating loss of $967,000. So amongst friends, let's call it $1 million.
Yeah.
So losing $1 million for the year. Now again, that's with depreciation. And we need to take that into account because we need to replace those assets as we go forward. So with that, you say to the community, well, you want us to keep the asset. That means I'm taking $1 million of your ratepayers' money, of your rates money, and putting it towards the Saleyards. And what's the net benefit to the community of doing that? Well, we've got the Saleyards there. The direct beneficiary of the Saleyards are the agents and the producers, the farmers that come in from around the area, not all Dubbo residents, not all Dubbo Regional Council residents. But of course, there is that report that we had from 2019 where this is our own report, we said that the Saleyards contribute, and this is 2019 numbers, $60.9 million to the local economy every year.
So then based upon that, so it's contributing $60.9 million. Is it something then that is an operation that we're a rural-based community? Should it be something that we should maybe just simply cop as a loss? And
so that might be an argument. But then you say, well, if we sold it, would it still inject $60.9 million? So in other words, one of the arguments put forward by people is they've said, council, you've got to hold on to it because it injects $60.9 million into the economy. Now, I have no problems with the $60.9 million figure. People come to the sale days, they go into a cafe while they're here. Oh, while I'm here, I'll just go and do some shopping. We've done all that analysis, and so I'm pretty confident that number's right. But that doesn't mean we have to own it. Doesn't mean we have to run it. If we leased it or we sold it, there would be a Saleyards there. Now, I can't say the numbers we got in the EOI, but I can say pretty confidently, looking at our written down value, for example, the Saleyards is worth in the vicinity of, say, $30 million or more. If we got an offer for $30 million, say, and someone handed over $30 million to council to buy that Saleyards, do you think they're going to shut it down the next day? Do you think they're going to say, oh, thank goodness I've got Dubbo Saleyards now, I'll shut it down? And that's right. That was a good use of my $30 million.
I'd be assuming if I'm that business person, I'd be wanting to get that money back.
You want to get that money back and you want to have a Saleyards running. So how are you going to do that? You want customers. So some people have said they'll double the prices and that'll send all the customers away. So again, I go and buy a business tomorrow and that sells widgets, and widgets are being sold for $1. So the first thing I do when I buy that business, I put the widgets up to $2 and I go, oh, I've lost my customers. Gee, what do I do now?
Is that potentially an argument, though, like the fact that, Dubbo's not the only place that has a Saleyards. Forbes has Saleyards. So why wouldn't, if I'm a farmer, if someone came in and privatised it and suddenly decided to up the prices and those sort of things, why wouldn't they simply go, you know what, stuff Dubbo, I'm going to go to Forbes? And
that's absolutely the potential. But I'm still thinking, if I'm the business, if I'm the manager, owner, if I've invested $30 million or more, whatever the price might be, into a Saleyards, and then I change the model so dramatically that all the customers leave, then I'm probably saying, didn't get that right, did I? I might need to bring the prices back. So there's three ways, I can make more money out of that business. I can increase my throughput, so I can generate more volume. That's one way any business can keep the price the same, increase the volume. Or I can reduce the costs. I can increase my efficiency. So I think anyone that came in would look to do that, and I can increase my price. Now, I think logically, if I bought that business tomorrow, I'd probably aim to do all three. I'd probably aim to get more sheep and cattle through because that's good because I'm getting able to charge on a per head basis. I'm going to say, hold on, these costs, we're paying too much for this and we don't need that, so let's reduce our costs and make it a more efficiently run business. And I'm probably going to say we need to put the prices up. And keep in mind, just to give you an idea, where we sit at the moment. So for cattle, for example, we, council, each cow that's sold out there, we get approximately $12.08 per head. Okay?
Yep.
Forbes charges $19.53.
Yeah, right.
Wagga charges $17.23 now, and I put a little asterisk beside that because we have a flat rate. Some of the other Saleyards have a sliding scale depending on how much that beast was sold for. But
there's a significant difference, though. Like,
there is.
That's not like 50 cents or $1. Like we're talking percentage-wise, 30, 40%. Why is that the case? Like, why aren't we charging those sort of figures?
Well, it's probably historical. Maybe as a council-run business, maybe we've tried to keep the prices low. Maybe there's been pressure from the community in the past with past councils where they've said, don't put the prices up too much. It's too hard for us poor old farmers to make money or the agents to make money. But when you start to break it down, and sheep's similar. Sheep in Dubbo, you pay $1.57 per head. In Forbes, you pay $2.25. So Forbes is in the vicinity of 50 to 70% dearer than Dubbo already. So if I came in as a new operator and looked at that, I could probably say, well, we could probably put the price up a little bit, I don't think I need to go to $20. I don't think I need to double it. But if I went to $14 or $15, then it's probably okay in the rest of the market. Now, if I'm a farmer, what am I thinking about? Am I thinking if Dubbo Regional Council owns those Saleyards, I'm going to sell my sheep and cattle? But if Billy Bloggs owns it, there's no way I'm selling it there. Do I care really who owns the business that I use? Or do I then say, I know if I go to one Saleyards, I'm going to get better prices for my sheep and cattle. So let's go where I'm going to get the best. Where are the most buyers at, for example?
Yeah.
And when you start to break it down, there's some other scary numbers here. So if you look, and I actually got a farmer to send me some invoices, so I had actual numbers to work with. So I got an invoice there where this particular farmer had sold some cattle and he'd sold each cow for $1,040.30.
Right.
Okay, so it was an average. There was a few different cows in there. It was an average of $1,040.30. His total cost for all of that, in terms of expense of sale, was $65.35. So about 6.33% were his total costs. So that's how much he paid on the invoice to the Dubbo Stock and Station Agents, DWSA, because they do the invoicing.
Right.
Of that $65.35, as you've just heard, we got $12.08.
Right.
So the total amount that we got of his sale was 1.16%.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we doubled our prices, and again, I'm not suggesting we do that, but when people say, if you put the price up, I'll go elsewhere. Well, hold on. If we doubled our prices, it'd be 2% of the total sale. So the majority of the money goes to the DWSA. Now, they've got different parts of that, but commission is the number one expense. Of that sale, $36.40 was commission.
Right, on each one of the cows.
On that particular invoice I looked at, yeah. So, and there's different rates. This particular farmer, I think, has got a pretty good commission rate. Some farmers might be charged more than that. Yep. But so when you break it down, you say, there's my cow. So I'm a farmer, $1,040. Of that, I paid $65.35. $36.40 went commission, $12.08 went to the council, but my total expense for the sale was 6.33%. If I see that cattle over at a different sale yards are typically selling for $1,060, $1,050. Do I care whether council's charging $12.08 or $15? Do I care about that $3 really? If I can get just $10 extra, or maybe I need a bit more than that to cover transport costs, but I don't need much extra. So if I've got better sale yards, better operation, more buyers, more competition, more cattle or sheep there at the sale, well, I'm going there. When you look at sheep, for example, that's similar, but I'll go down. So this one, again, I got an invoice from another farmer. He, on this particular invoice, average sheep price, $224.40. The amount that was paid out of that to the Dubbo Stock and Station Agents was $11.76, and council received $1.57.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Again, commission was the major expense at $7.85. Now, the total expense for the sale in that case was 5.31%. The main reason for that is that you don't have tags on your sheep. You've got ear tags, so there's a scanning fee when you've got your tags for the cattle, and you don't need to weigh the sheep. You're paying on a per sheep rate. So again, in that case, total expense for the sale was 5.31%. Council received 0.7% of the total cost of that sale. The other way to look at it is this. The vendors for all the sheep and cattle that were sold last year, approximately the vendors were charged $21.7 million. Of that, council got $3.4 million.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Now, and I'm not saying that the agents made the rest in profit.
Yeah.
Commission is obviously the largest part of that.
Yeah.
But there are other, they charge a fee for the weighbridge.
Yeah.
They charge a scanning fee. There are other fees associated with that. I don't know the business model of DWSA. I'm not pretending to know what
and
they
you're certainly
do.
not sitting here either begrudging the operation to making money. You know, like that's their operation and they're making money out of that, and that's great. But I suppose the key point is the fact that council's not making enough to cover the cost of the continual running of this right now.
So we're subsidising it with ratepayers' money, and when you look at that, $21.7 million it cost the vendors to sell through our Saleyards, of which council, the owner of an asset that's worth more than $30 million, received $3.4 million. So in other words, we need maybe $1.2, $1.5 million more for that to be a viable operation. And let's face it, if we're owning that business, we should make a little bit of profit. Yep. So then we can not be taking money from the ratepayers of Dubbo, but we can say, hey, guess what? We don't need to put a rate rise through next year because we're generating some money from our Saleyards. So if that $3.4 million went up to, say, $5 million. So if council received $5 million rather than 3.4 or $4.9 million, that $1.5 million, we'd be making profit on that.
Yep.
And then the total expense to vendors would go from 21.7 to maybe $23 million, $23.2 million, that kind of number. Yep. So there wouldn't be much difference.
You're telling me about here that we should be making money on this. I can't see why we can't be making money on this. You know what I mean? Like there's a significant turnover that rolls through those Saleyards every year. The fact that we're sitting here now and not making money on this, it does concern me. I'm a resident of it. I'm entitled to my opinion on this. It concerns me the fact that council's not making money on this. And
so whether or not we sell, whether or not we lease, whether or not we keep it internally, and in particular, if we keep it internally, we'll be doing some modelling over the next couple of weeks with the information we've now got, because we'll need to put it to councillors to make a decision in June, not the final decision, but the direction. So in June, at our June council meeting, councillors will be asked to make one of three decisions. They'll be asked to say, now that we've seen the EOIs, do you want to go down the sale path? Because remember, they were only EOIs. So if we went to sale, we'd go to a full-blown tender process, which is slightly different to an EOI process. But then the clear direction would be sell. Or do we want to lease? We've seen the information now. If you want to lease, we'll go down a dedicated tender path with lease. Or do you want to keep it internal? But the only way that would be reasonable to keep it internal would be, in my mind, if we're going to keep it, our $12.08 needs to get up closer to what Wagga and Forbes charge, and our $1.57 needs to get up closer to what Forbes charge there. If we did that, then we could generate an extra $1.5 million. But guess what? Prices would go up. So some of the fears we've heard, council, you need to own it, otherwise the prices will go up. Well,
they're going to have to go up.
They're going to have to go up whatever way. And in fact, maybe the best opportunity for prices not to go up is for an external operator to take it, sale or lease, for example, and run it more efficiently than we do, where they can make money out of it without putting the prices up to those same levels. The only last one I want to mention on this, and we have talked about this for a little while, but
that's right. No, because it's been a real source of debate in the community. So it's and the stuff you're presenting here today, Matt, is, I think, giving the facts and the figures. That's really important for people to hear. Yeah.
The other one I want to mention briefly is that some people have said council's already made up their mind. So everyone knows that council's going to do X and put X in whatever you want to do. Let me say this, and this is a really important part. If any councillor turns up to a council meeting with a predetermined position, I'm going to vote this way. I'm not talking about Saleyards, I'm talking about any decision. I'm definitely going to vote this way. I'm not going to listen to the debate. I'm not going to take into account the information. I'm going to vote this way. Then have a read of the Code of Conduct Policy. And I won't go through them in detail, but if you go and read sections 3.4, 3.15 and 8.7, either one or all of those are breached, depending on how you did it, if you turn up as a councillor to a council meeting with a predetermined position. So all this rubbish out there about they've already made up their mind, well, I know I haven't. In fact, I only saw the EOIs on Thursday this week, so how could I possibly have made up my mind? And let's pluck numbers out of the air here. If I saw an offer that came in to sell the Saleyards for $200 million, I'm pretty confident I would have said, let's sell the Saleyards. That $200 million, what else could we do in our community with $200 million?
Yep.
If the EOIs came in and the best offer for the selling of the Saleyards was $1 million, I'm pretty confident I'll be saying, let's not sell the Saleyards. So when people said to me, oh yeah, you councillors have already made up your mind, you're going to sell it. Well, at that point, I hadn't even seen the EOIs. I've seen the EOIs now, so I've got a clearer picture of it all, but I still haven't made up my mind. I've still got more information.
you've got a clear understanding of what the current position of the Saleyards is, and you've also, I'd suggest, got a bit of an idea as to the fact that, look, if we're going to maintain and move forward on this, well, there's going to have to be some changes. And
the other part that's important to keep in mind is there is some, and I don't know that I'd call it legislation, but there's certainly some guidelines around council-owned businesses. And the guidelines from high levels of government say that you should be getting, on any business you own, a return of at least the same as the Treasury bond. So call it, at the moment, maybe about 4% in round numbers. So in other words, the logic is that if you think you're a clever council and you're going to own a business and run it, well, if you took that money from that business and said, we're just going to own Treasury bonds, you know you're going to get 4% at the moment. So you should be getting better than 4% return because you've got a bit of risk associated with the business. But at the bare minimum, why you own that business if you're not getting, for the ratepayers, the same as Treasury bonds, which is no risk, and you sit back there and collect the money. Yeah. So one of the, I think, really good ideas about the EOI process was we've now got, and again, I can't say the number, but we've got a value that we know that the Saleyards could be sold for tomorrow. So if we say we want to get a return, and again, I just plucked that number of $30 million because that's talked about in some of our documentation that's public. So at $30 million, we should be getting a return, say at 4%, of $1.2 million. So the ratepayer should be saying, well, good, council owns that $30 million business there. We should be getting $1.2 million return, positive return, net profit every year. If not, tell them to sell it and put that money in the bank. Now, the offer we got might have been less than $30 million, might have been more than $30 million, but councillors go, well, now we know the return we should be getting as a net profit after depreciation. That's the return we should be getting.
As you say, I think it's a fair enough argument. I think it's something that we'll discuss further, getting closer to the time. Now, the Wellington Caves, Matt, is an important tourism facility, not only for Wellington, but for Dubbo as well, and the whole region, I'd suggest. But the weather has not been kind to this area of late. Something's happened there. What's the information in regards to the caves for us?
Well, a couple of things, actually. There's been the University of New South Wales down there doing some groundwater research. And they've got some things, I think, that's quite interesting. They've done some hydrology monitoring in the phosphate mine.
Right.
And they're looking at that, and that's part of the University of New South Wales National Groundwater Recharge Observing System.
Right.
So they can observe how that is actually recharged. So that's quite fascinating. I did see a paper that came through from that. It was a 13 or 14 page paper, so haven't absorbed all that at the moment, but it's actually quite interesting. So that's one part, but also there's still the ongoing investigation into our phosphate mine. And there's an organisation called DRC Underground,
right?
And they're a mining company. They do tunnelling and they use tunnelling materials. So we've still got part of that whole phosphate mine experience shut down at the moment. You can't, it's not completely open to the public at the moment. We're still working on that.
Is that because there's a rising water table there, or what's actually happened that's created the problem?
Well, it's been closed for a few years because we had some shifting of ground. That was probably more about the intense drought and then significant rain. So obviously the ground dried out significantly and that probably opened up some cracks.
So
and
it became
a lot
unstable,
of rain.
has it? Is that basically the problem?
There's a risk there that it might have people down there one day and then there's a bunch of dirt on them, which we don't love the idea. That's right. No. And again, we're risk averse. I don't want to be the mayor when I get a phone call one day to say, by the way, that mine collapsed with 10 people down there. So essentially with DSI Underground, we've been doing some work with those. That company, they've been doing some site inspections and basically looking at how that might be made safe again. Their specialty is mining and tunnelling, so if anyone can get to the stage where it's made safe, that would be them. Now, again, we're not paying for any of this at this stage, so that's fantastic. If we get to the stage where a solution is made obvious, there'll be some cost associated with that. How we pay for that, I don't know, but I would love to see that phosphate mine in full operation again. Wellington Caves are fantastic, but you're dealing with nature here, damn it, and nature
that's
sometimes
right.
does.
Unfortunately, and underground things move.
That's right. So anyway, it's looking positive at this stage, but it's a research facility, it's a tourism facility, and certainly we need more work done on there to make it a better tourism facility. But things are happening
again, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would.
Well, this is interesting. Are we looking at holding the World Shearing and Wool Handling Championships right here in Dubbo? Is this the old click-go, the shears type moment?
It might be. I didn't know there was a World Shearing and Wool Handling competition.
That would be so cool to see, to be honest.
It would be, especially if it was here in Dubbo.
Absolutely. Is this a potential?
Potential, yes. And to talk about how much planning goes into things, this championship potentially would be held in Dubbo in 2029.
Okay, yeah.
I've already met with the potential organisers, because it goes around the world to different locations, and then when it goes around the world to different countries, it goes to different locations in those countries.
Yep.
There's some people who are very focused on Dubbo. One of them's from WA,
Right.
and we hold competitions now. Part of the show, we've held other higher level competitions.
Yep.
They're looking at holding the the national championships here in Dubbo in 2026.
Right.
And that would be a good taster, a good tease, if you like.
Yep.
And then their real target, though, is holding the World Championships here in 2029.
That would be so cool.
It would be
Just
cool.
simply to have a World Championship happening here in Dubbo. But,
absolutely
watching some of those shearers over the years and the way they go at it, that's impressive. They're impressive, these people.
Now, they would obviously use the showground. That's what they use it now. They'd like to have some more infrastructure built there to be able to better facilitate, better accommodate that.
Yeah.
That's obviously going to cost money. So the meeting was really about, does council have any money for this? No, not really. How can we help with grants? Yes, we can help with grants. So down that path and see what they can do. But if something was built there, it would be there for everyone forever.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that sometimes happens when you get large championships. It'd be there as a facility that everyone could use going forward. It can be used for training, for example. So you could have companies who want to come in and do some shearing training. Okay, we've got the facility there. We can now charge you to use that facility. But it's just interesting to see the different things that might happen
So
in Dubbo.
is the national championship, is it locked in for 2026?
2026 is still down to a couple.
Okay,
there's
so
still
we're not quite over the line
not
yet.
quite over the line with that one yet. But again, getting the right facilities in place, I think, is an important part of this whole process.
Oh, well, it's an exciting thing to happen,
quite
possibly, yeah. Now, the Dubbo Support Centre held a senior digital literacy program with over 50 participants during the week. And you had the chance to present some certificates. So first of all, who is this group?
So this is a group, I actually went to their opening. It didn't seem like that long ago. It's supported by an organisation out of Sydney where they do support for new residents. And they do seem to have a focus on the Asian subcontinent. So there seems to be more Indian, Nepalese, Bangladesh, etc. For whatever reason. But it doesn't matter. You can have anyone that wants to go along there and get some support. So if you've moved to Dubbo and you go, I don't know how I go about finding where I can go and find a gym or renting somewhere. I'm renting somewhere at the moment. How do I find out other places there might be to rent or whatever? So basically any support for new residents. And I remember at the opening there were some people that came out from the board in Sydney and I went through that and they said, well, we think we do a great job in Sydney, but we thought we'd go to a regional location. And we looked at Dubbo because, you do a good job in getting people to move there. I talked about the 18.5% in terms of our population that's born overseas. Dubbo is becoming a very popular destination for lots of overseas countries.
That subcontinent area is a big influx now coming through, isn't there?
Very much so. So I thought, great, and I'll be interested to see what they do. They do various help, and I got an email from the manager down there about a week or so ago, Amrit, and he said he was running, as you correctly said there, a senior digital literacy course. And I thought, well, that's fantastic. And I just think in terms of people understanding how they might use some of their modern communications, it might be just email, it might be just some banking software, that type of thing. Scams, spotting scams, how do you spot a scam, all those type of things. And so basically opened it up. It was a free course. What he was really happy about was there were a number of people there from Asian subcontinent. Seemed to be a lot of Nepalese there, but also a few Dubbo people, including a couple of Aboriginal people.
Oh, was that good? So it's not just specifically sort of designed just for the subcontinent region of people.
Correct.
It's open for anybody.
This one was open for anyone that was a senior. So I think over 50. So, in 10 or 15 years we'll qualify for that.
So. I'd like to think that'd be the case.
But again, I went to go along there, and it was actually a fair bit of training. I think they talked about it being around about 20 hours of training for you to get your certificate. So the course has been around over a few weeks, and then the presentation, if you like, was on Friday last week. So there was a chance to go along and talk to some of those people about their training and what they did. And I think it's things that you and I might take for granted. It was using social media. It was sending emails. It was just some of those basics. Well, not everyone's familiar with that. And when you've come from overseas, you might have different processes. What do the banking applications look like overseas compared to here? So, no, I think they're doing a good job there. And I think the main challenge for them is just to get their word out there about the fact that the Dubbo Support Centre exists. It's in Macquarie Street. It's upstairs above the Deaf Chef there. So Macquarie Street there. So good facility, good programs. Take advantage of them if you can. Even just pop in and see them one day.
What a great initiative. Now, Matt, coming up this week, you've got a number of standing committee meetings. I think there's 3 standing committees. Is that right? 3?
Yep, that's right.
Now, I'm sure there's going to be lots of interesting topics to discuss. So, a couple of quick little things. If anyone's interested in actually wanting to tune in, because you actually can watch these, can you now? So you can sit down and listen to the standing committees via online. So when are they happening, and potentially what are some of the points of discussion?
So Thursday, second Thursday of each month is typically, sometimes it changes for various reasons, but typically second Thursday of each month are our standing committee meetings. They start at 5:30 and we roll the 3 of those through, so depends how long each one takes. But essentially, I love it when people come and sit in the gallery. I do like to see people there physically. We do get a few people who still turn up physically. Most people watch them online. So you just go to dubbo.nsw.gov.au, go to our website, and it'll have a link there to go and actually watch those meetings. Yeah. You can watch them live, or you can come back and watch it later. So you can skip forward past. There's no boring bits really, but if you think some bits are a bit boring,
I was going to say you can skip past the boring bits and see the really exciting bits. So actually,
all of it's exciting.
All of it's exciting, of course. So what
are
some of the exciting things that might be up for points of discussion this week?
Well, a lot, and we've actually got some presentations from some people as well. One of the things I think that's fascinating is our insight survey. Right. So that was basically our community survey, but we've got the company that ran that for us coming along, giving us a presentation on that. And we've actually got someone coming along to do a presentation about Saleyards, surprisingly enough.
There you
it
go.
seems to be a hot topic.
Yeah, very topical.
But the model they've got is a bit like an online sales model. So there's Auctions Plus is a very popular online sales model. To give you an idea of how popular that is, Auctions Plus sells approximately 5 times the number of sheep and cattle that we sell at our sale yard. So that's big. The model they've got is a slightly different model that almost seems to combine physical and online. Yeah, right. Is that something we should be looking at? Yeah. Don't know. Anyway, they're going to come along and do a presentation on that as well. So that'll be interesting. A few other bits and pieces as well, keeping in mind that the outcomes from the standing committees are not council resolutions. They're recommendations. So someone sees something and go, what are they doing there? That's crazy. You've got 2 weeks between the committee meetings and the council meeting to contact your friendly local councillor and say,
information sharing and gathering.
Yeah, that's right. Some people call it a trial run. I don't mind that as a term, because you do get a chance to have that bit of debate beforehand. Committee meetings have slightly different rules of debate, slightly different processes there. It's a little bit freer, not quite as strict. Yep. And so you get a chance to talk about those things in a slightly different way. And then by the time it gets to council, hopefully you've got all the information to make very good decisions at council.
Is this Thursday, 7 o'clock?
Thursday, 5:30.
5:30, sorry.
5:30, yeah. Yep. 7 o'clock, it'll probably be all over by then.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Oh, look at this. Now, I know you've got lots of events that you generally go to in a formal capacity, but I noticed this week you've got one not so formal, but I'm sure it'll be a fantastic opportunity, because you've got a Year 10 class reunion, St John's, 1983.
1983,
you know what?
1983?
You know what? It's funny you should mention that, because I was a Year 10 1984. So I was at South when you were at over there at St John's. So there you go. I would have been in Year 9 at South when you were over there at Year 10 at
But then, of course,
St John's.
I came to South in Year 11 and 12.
Oh,
so
there you go.
84 and 85, I was up at South, yeah.
So. We probably threw apples at each other or something.
Not at all, no.
Or we would have been 16, 17 by then. We would have just been simply throwing insults, I suggest, rather than apples by that stage.
Well, we did play when we came across, because St John's College back in those days only went to Year 10.
Yes, that's
right. And then from there, our students, our year group, our cohort, went in 3 different directions, or probably 4 to a certain extent, but went to South High, went to Delroy High, or Dubbo High, where the cultural centre is now, still existed back in those days. Yes. And, of course, some went off to boarding school or maybe pursued a job or whatever, but mainly those 3. But I remember at South High when we got there, because it was a reasonably large cohort of students that went to South High. We didn't make up the majority of the year, but there might have been, I'm guessing here, maybe 25, 30 of us there. Yep. So we used to play a bit of touch footy that was fishies, of course, the St John's College Catholics there, the fishies versus I don't think we call it Protestants, but fishies versus South High kind of thing. So there used to be a bit of very serious touch footy going on there at lunchtime with the fishies playing against the other ones there. But I actually didn't mind that. I mean, I would have preferred our St John's year group to stay all the way through to Year 12, but that wasn't possible at the time. But it was another group of people, so I've got another group of friends from South High and other reunions to go to. But yes, definitely this Saturday, 15th of June, hopefully everyone that went to St John's College back in 1983 in Year 10 has already heard about it. We've got lots of coming. Actually, the organisers, well done to the 3 organisers. They've done a really good job there. Helen Jones, Jennifer used to be Jennifer Shibble, Jennifer O'Connor,
Yes.
and Sharon Walker used to be Sharon Hunter.
Yep.
3 of those have organised it. I remember myself and Mick Harvey and Graham Campbell did the first school reunion way back at the 10-year school reunion. Was it 10-year or 5-year? Anyway, it was the first one. It's a lot of work.
Many years ago.
Many years ago. A lot of work. And so for those 3, well done. Thank you for doing that. We're a year late for the 40th, so it's the 41st reunion. So
that's right.
So I think it was just a matter of trying to
Getting
get
people
time
organised and together with it.
get organised. Yeah, so hopefully everyone's heard about it, and that will start at 5:30. Showing our age now, you wouldn't have started a party at 5:30.
We'll all be finished by 10, back in bed. We'll wear nightcaps.
Probably that's about it. Yeah. So anyway, hopefully anyone that went to St John's with me in year 2, hopefully they've all heard about that, and we will get a good group turning up there. So looking forward to that, and yes, in an unofficial capacity.
Well, you have a wonderful night, mate. Enjoy. Well, it's been a big one today. We got through a lot there, particularly in regards to Saleyards, but it was a really good discussion. I really enjoyed that. But, of course, we finish up with our Limerick of the week. So what have you got for us this week?
It did actually stir up a little bit more discussion than I thought it would, going cashless, given the fact that, as I say, 1% of people were affected.
Oh, yes. Very
so
good.
I thought I'd do my Limerick this week all about our cashless waste facilities.
Lovely.
So here we go. The waste sites in Dubbo declare, leave cash at home, be aware. With cards you can pay in an effortless way for a service that's handled with care.
Nicely done as usual. Well, folks, that wraps up for another episode of Straight from the Mayor's Mouth. Until next week, take care.
Straight from the Mayor's Mouth with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.